Hi, this is Craig Stocks, and this is my photo critique of the day. Today's image was provided by Scott Sternberg. So Scott, thank you very much for sharing your image with us. The image is obviously a waterfall. You can really feel the power of this water. It looks like the water flow is up, maybe higher than it normally is, or he managed to catch it at a peak flow, but there's just a lot of water flowing over this waterfall and into the pool here. It looks like there's maybe a bit of a cave behind the waterfall, but that dark area behind the waterfall really helps it stand out. I like the way you framed the image so that we have framing elements all around. There's even some leaves or flowers here in the foreground that look like they're in focus. It's a bit hard to tell after Facebook has had its way with the image, but it looks like they're nicely in focus and almost even appear as if they might be the subject of the photo rather than the background. Some interesting choices that Scott has made with this image. First, obviously he chose to present this in black and white, which is a bit unusual for a nature image. Usually we think of these as being color, but by choosing black and white, that really focuses on the lines of the waterfall, and I think more importantly even, it highlights the texture of this rough rock wall, both on the side here and in the background, in the foreground, and then the roughness of the water and the water in the plunge pool here. All that texture really jumps out at you, and I think that might have been lost or become a little bit confusing in color, where black and white really lets that texture shine through. The other interesting choice was the choice of shutter speed. And the classical approach with moving water, and especially waterfalls, is to use a very slow shutter speed, something in an eighth or a quarter of a second or slower, so that the water becomes blurred and kind of a silky smooth ribbon rather than a rough flow. Now in this case, the flow of the water, the texture here kind of mimics and matches the texture in the rock, which can be a good thing. It may also create almost too much of a good thing, to where the texture becomes kind of almost an overriding element of the picture versus the subject. So that might be something to think about. Now, if you're handy with Photoshop, you can simulate that flow of water by using a motion blur filter and then limiting the filter to just the flow of water. So if we had used a slower shutter speed, or if we want to simulate it in Photoshop, that creates a smooth flow like this. And if you compare the two, just thinking for the future, it creates a very different feel, not necessarily right or wrong, but just very different between having the texture highlighted in the waterfall versus the smooth flow that you get with a slow shutter speed. And of course, to get a slow shutter speed, you either have to have a tripod or very steady hands and a good image stabilized lens, or a camera with image stabilization built in. Usually you can handhold a quarter, maybe even a half second with a wide angle lens, and if you take several frames, sometimes put the camera on continuous and just hold the shutter down and take 3 or 4 or 5 frames consecutive, usually you'll get one of them that's sharp enough to use within a reasonably slow shutter speed. So that is something that you can do when you're out in the field if you don't have a tripod. The other thing I might consider with the image, that even though we have the framing elements all around, the rock on the right has a lot of texture and contrast, and again, as you've heard me talk about many times, it's kind of leading us out of the frame. So we might want to try cropping the image by cropping that rock out and maybe even crop in a little bit from the right, and that gives the image a different feel. It's still a very tight crop. Obviously it's even tighter now. Maybe loosen this up a little bit over here. But I feel like that gives us more emphasis on the waterfall. We still have all of the pool here, and what we have lost is a bright element that was leading us out of the frame and competing with the water itself. And I think that works equally well whether you have the blurred water or the original with the rough water. So just some different crops to consider and maybe to play with, but overall I think this is a wonderful image. It certainly captures the power of the waterfall and the texture of the water falling into this pool, and Not sure where he took this image. It doesn't look like Central Illinois, but good job with this, Scott. And again, thank you for sharing your image and opening yourself up to the thoughts. If you have any other thoughts, feel free to share them in the comments. I always look forward to hearing what other people think. I'm just sharing the things that I'm seeing in the hopes that it will help all of us think more deeply about the images that we take. Certainly, you should spend some time going through this kind of a process with your own images. Look at them, think about what you like about the image and what you don't like about the image, and then also think about, in a perfect world, what might have been done differently, or what might you still do differently to maybe bring the image to the next level. So thanks everybody for joining me today, and as always, have a great day.